So I would like to share something that's for whatever reason has come up. It's very near and dear to my heart that I wanted to share. And it started coming up when the pandemic started, when that first music video from Alicia Keys, "You've done a good job," for all the frontline workers. I can't tell you how many times I looked at that video. And part of it is that I have a real tender place in my heart for people, the blue collar workers in our country, the trades. And as we go through the back end of the pandemic, I found out the other day that our dentist is having such a hard time finding another dental hygienist that he's cleaning his own patients' teeth, and that the folks who are doing our Buddha Hall have been just pulling their hair out because they can't find people to work in the trades. And of course, the great old ones who are now in their 50s and 60s are starting to retire, and there's no place for the transmission to be made on how to really the next generation of skilled blue collar workers in our country. And I want to share a little bit my own experience, and also to see that it's really important how we label people and how that can impact them in our world. So my experience was, okay, I got out of high school. High school was, I had a sister who was in the top 1% of school, and if anybody has followed a bright sibling, there can be some serious expectations on what you're supposed to provide. And so, Jane was up at the top of the class, and so Nancy, of course, should be close after her sister. Well, a B at best was what I became with a lot of hard work. Studying wasn't great, memorizing wasn't great, getting the answers all lined up in my head and just giving them back to the teacher. I could never really do that well. I thrived in English, but I was always fascinated by the vocational tech kids. They got to be, beauticians and dental hygienists, electricians, plumbers, doing things like that. But I was not allowed to do that. And to this day, I don't know how to type. I mean, spell check is my biggest friend on my computer. And so, and I was also the one who mowed the lawn with my dad. I was the one who took care of the roses. I was the one who washed the cars. And I've had maybe 2 years of college. And then, so after leaving, I kind of ran away from home when I was 18 and went to the ski country where I, drug, sex, and rock and roll, but it was a lot of other good things too. And one of the things that happened was, because I didn't have a college education, there was kind of an open culture in these tourist communities in America that if you were willing to work hard, you could make some pretty good money. So I worked at the ski area, and I was hired by a big Montana cowboy. Keith was about 6'5", weighed about 300 pounds. He had almost an all-women paint crew. They were building condominiums, and when you weren't working at the ski area in the winter, when summertime come, many people would go back home to their families and stuff. But those of us who stayed for the summer would find work a lot of times, either planting trees or working on road crews or working for construction. So Keith hired almost an all-women work crew, and the guys in the sheetrock were always ahead of us, would say, "What are you doing? Why you got these women working for you?" And he said, "You know what? They show up, they're not hungover usually, and they usually show up, and they do a really, really good job. That's why I have these women on my crew." And then after that, I worked for a stonemason. I've done tree planting, I've done carpentry. And when I lived in Idaho many years ago, my friends, my neighbors were truck drivers and farmers and loggers and people that worked at the mill. And so I'm just looking at with the difficulty that is arising right now in our culture, not being able to find these really well-skilled blue-collar trade workers. Is there a stereotype? Is there something in our culture that's starting to change but needs to change? And these are some of the things that I myself, being on the college track, although I was very reticent of being on the college track, is I think this is a bias that happens in our culture that I just wanted to share. And I have a personal experience of being with these folks, and I've lived in that culture, and I have a very tender place for the plumbers and the electricians and for the contractors. There's something about there's no baloney. There's kind of this straight talk, this kind of down-to-earth kind of energy that they have. But here are some of the things that I remember. First of all, and this is something that we are passing on. It's a very poor perception of blue collar work. So first of all, the one stereotype that I got when I was in high school is kids who go to vo-tech are dumb kids. You know, when you were little, you were able to build. We built snow forts. We built houses for Barbie. We were down in the woods building tree houses, and that was great when you were a kid. But when you went to high school, it's time to grow up. It's time to get serious. It's time to go to college, get a job, be successful, and that all that tactile building things is just a lot of make believe. But what happens if you are gifted with that kind of intelligence that is more mechanically inclined, that puts things together, that has a much easier time to do that than just repeating answers and being logical and doing essays and things like that? But well, you were sent to the tech school. It wasn't really considered to be what everybody was aiming for. And it was usually the less intelligent kids, the kids that didn't make the grade, the troublemakers, the lazy ones. And over time, that conditioning is still playing in some aspect, and it's a very destructive mindset. And and one of the things that goes along with that is that I remember that anytime we would go, and see, my family was more of a blue collar family, so I didn't get this that much, but a lot of my friends did, is that anytime you ever saw a parent and a teacher walk by a janitor or drive past someone working on the roads, they'd go, "This is why I want you to study. You don't want to end up like them, do you?" So there was once again a stereotype that the folks who do our roads, the ones that fix our plumbing, that they're the ones that this menial work does not have any value to it. And that not working in air conditioning is not as glorious and important as other works. You should study and go to college so you can get an important job, not a menial job like this. So, you don't want to end up as a janitor, or the garbage man or the plumber or something like that. That was a unspoken or sometimes quite a spoken value that was placed, at least in my generation. It might be changing now, but the fact that we still have a problem with this, there might be something still streaming. So the stereotypes, this is where I'm kind of thinking about these past few days, is that it starts imputing qualities and character traits of groups that can be really harmful, really divisive, really prejudiced. I don't think we ever intentionally do this, put people into these stereotypes, but they can be very extreme to where we start putting people in, quote, blue collar, menial work as in particular kind of party. They drive a particular kind of vehicle. They dress in certain kind of clothes. They all think alike. They're of a certain religion. They wear a certain kind of, we've got them just kind of nailed, thinking that people who are in this particular service in the world are kind of stereotyped and put into these boxes. And that what happens is that our youth hear this. Our young adults, our kids in high school. They say the line to get into college right now, there's a waiting list all over the country. And here we got our contractor crying for work. He can't find some good, hardworking young people who want to be in construction because everybody wants to go to college and get into tech and get into startup companies and making new platforms and new programs and things like that. And so the other thing that I saw on the website is there's this, and this was a really interesting website, it was done by two men who have basically built their whole life in the trades, and how they're trying to really talk to the young people in America and say, you really, there's something really important here to learn. So he said that there's this saying that we have in the culture: love what you do and you'll never work a day in your life. This kind of gets thrown around. And he says the idea is if you find something that you so enjoy, that you're so passionate about, it won't feel like work. Instead, it will feel fun and enjoyable every day. And so you'll never work, which he meant, put in parentheses, get frustrated, toil, be disappointed, any day in your life. He says the problem is real work is always work. Even people who love what they do, there are days where you don't want to get out of bed, you wish you'd be doing something different, you're very, very tired. And this includes everybody from the high-tech industries all the way down to the folks who pick up our garbage. There are so many days where the folks in the blue-collar frontline workers that, they crawl around in our crawl spaces, fixing electricity, they fix our plumbing. They work framing our houses in 90-degree weather. But they love what they do. If we talk to John, if we talk to Mike, if we talk to Kenny and John, they did it for 40, 50 years and they loved what they were doing. But says, is it hard work? Yep. Is it frustrating? You bet. Did you ever work a day in your life? Every day of my life I worked, and I loved it. So there's once again that there's this myth that says that people that are in those trades, that's because there's nothing else they can do, and that they do it and it's crappy and they're unhappy, when in fact they really have fulfilled incredible lives. And that when I see those folks, they benefit us so directly. They keep our houses warm, they make sure we have clean running water, they build a home where people raise their families for years. They take care of the roads so we can go to work for the rest of for years and years to come. They literally build the physical world that we inhabit. And the trick is to somehow get the message across. And I see this in my mind, how much I loved being with them and working with them. I was the only woman on a carpentry crew. I got hazed for the first 6 weeks, but then I made it, and it worked out just fine. I ended up being quite respected on the crew because I showed up every day, usually not hungover, and I, did a good job. So the point is to find meaningful, honest work, and that this is something that we should teach the youth in our culture, that this is a very viable, respectful, important work that they can do in the world. That you can do a startup company, you can do some problem-solving apps, you can start TikTok, whatever. We've somehow changed the way of value that really things in our world are seen. And so we have an obsession with tech, and as a result of that, we've really put that way up there. That's where everybody wants to go. They want to have these degrees in IT and business management and whatever, and nobody wants to be a carpenter or a plumber or whatever. So this is a really tender place. I really see the power of conceptuality that really kind of drives some of the perceptions we have, whether romanticizing the Silicon Valley paradigm and then minimizing the more frontline worker paradigm. But in the end, in my heart, it's like everybody wants to be happy and not suffer. And that this respect, this value to be able to be placed on those that take care of us in one way needs to be equalized to those folks who create things to entertain us, to make things faster, more efficient. And luckily, they're starting to interface now. The trades are definitely getting a lot of IT, a lot of technology, making things more complicated, but also somewhat more creative. So I just wanted to put my 2 cents into my own experience, and from what I'm hearing from, Dr. Ben and John, is that there's a real need for specialized service work, and that it is and it's hard work. There's a lot of training involved, but it can be really a fulfilling work. And I personally have experienced that in my life, and I never ever regret it for a moment, the hard work that I put in with this body of mine to keep me alive and to keep me well fed. And the people that I met were really the salt of the earth. They're not called salt of the earth for nothing. They really do abide in that place. And so I just wanted to put my 2 cents in as far as what I think is going on right now.